Hello, I'm Rick Stivers of YoungMartin'sReels, and today we're going to be going through this Quantum Optix OP60. And this reel has a somewhat interesting history. I pulled this reel off the bottom of a lake. It come in when we were doing a drag one time looking for some stuff, and it come in attached to a broken rod. And I went through it years ago and tried to clean it up a bit, but it's still really gritty. It made a lot of noise when you wound it, and so I've never fished it. If you listen to it now, it's still a bit on the noisy side, but not near as much as it was 2 hours ago. 2 hours ago I took it apart, cleaned and lubed the bearings, got a good feel for what's inside it, and we're going to go through this reel today, and I'm going to show you what parts I would replace if I were going to replace them. But this is only about a $30 reel to buy brand new. They're old, they're out there in the blister packs, and so for about $30 you can buy this reel brand new. So I wouldn't spend a lot of money on it, but if you have one that actually means something to you and you really wanted to fix it, Mike's Reel Repair offers parts for this reel. So I did look it up, and to replace all 4 bearings and the knob that's missing on this side, which I've made one to go on the side of it, but to replace all those parts is going to cost you about $20 plus shipping. So if you wanted to do it and fix it for real, you could. It's a nice reel, it works well, but the bearings, all 4 bearings in this reel, well, 3 of the 4 bearings are in pretty sad shape, and they make quite a bit of noise. I did take them apart, clean them, and lubricate them as best I can. They're sealed bearings, but they make quite a bit of noise. So let's go over it. We're going to start off by removing the knob. This is not the original knob that belongs on the side of this reel. I made this knob out in my wood shop. I had the screw, the knob had broken, and all that was left in it was a screw back before I ever got it. So I made one on my wood lathe, and it works fine. It just isn't real attractive. Remove the handle out of the side. Okay, next thing we're going to do is remove the side plate. Now I happen to know that all 4 of the screws that go in this side plate are all the same size, so I'm not trying to keep track of which one goes where because they're all 4 the same. Now it is not mandatory to take this bump cap off, but I have found that it makes it easier to get it on and off. All I'm going to do is loosen it up just a little bit. And start lifting out on the case. And off comes the side. And be careful, you got a bearing there. That bearing will snap in, pull out, it's fine. But it's, like I said, if you look at this bearing, and remember, this reel was at the bottom of a lake. So the bearing does roll, but it does make noise. So set the side plate over to the side, and at this point you would like to be able to take out your main gear, but you can't do that yet because you've got to take out your axle shaft. So let's go ahead and do that. Unscrew your drag nut, remove your spool. That gives us access to the axle. Now, when we rotate around, you're going to see a screw appear. And because of the anti-reverse, you can only go in one direction. Alright, see that Phillips head screw right there? We're going to take out that screw that's in your crosswind block, and that holds this axle shaft in. So we're going to remove that screw. And with that removed, we can slide out the axle shaft. With the axle shaft removed, you can now remove the main gear. And be careful, because there's 2 shims down in here that are on the other bearing. You don't want to lose those. At this point, you can remove your crosswind block and your crosswind gear. This crosswind plate right here, there's no reason to take it out unless you've got a lot of dirt and grease caked in here that you need to get out. This is full of nice fresh grease, so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time cleaning it up, but I'm going to show you how I would clean it. Okay, now we want to take the nut off of the rotor. In order to take that off, you have to take this screw out. That's a locking screw for it. Okay, locking screws out. Now, this nut removes in a clockwise direction. So it's reverse threaded from what most normal screws are. So you want to go clockwise, remove the nut. Once the nut is removed, the rotor comes off. That gets you down to your upper bearings. Okay? Now, we're going to go ahead and remove the anti-reverse. Now let me show you how that works real quick. Okay? When you're going in one direction, well the rotor's off. But when you're rotating in this direction, it pulls that crosswind block in, or anti-reverse block in. When it goes the opposite direction, see how it moves it out? So when that rotor tries to reverse in that direction, it moves out. And this corner of it right here, right there, catches on these teeth in here. And that locks the rotor. That's your anti-reverse. All right, let's go ahead and take that assembly off. Now you want to be really careful when you get here because there's a very small washer, very thin shim washer right here on the top of this. Okay, set it over to the side, keep all three of those parts together. Now your spring is going to stay with this sleeve right here. There's no reason to take it off as long as it's binding. You want it to bind because that's what gives you your resistance on that sleeve for your anti-reverse. So you want it to be able to bind, which is what it's doing. Okay, you don't want to lube that. With that out, now we've got two screws to remove to take out the pinion and the pinion bearings. There's one screw. And here comes the second screw. With those removed, now you can pull out on your pinion, and you've got a pinion, you've got two bearings. These two bearings here are where most of the noise is coming from. If I wished, I could go ahead and just replace these two, and the two in the side case probably wouldn't make any noise. So I could probably make this a very quiet reel again just by replacing these two bearings, and that would cost about $8 plus shipping. So that's where we are. I'm not going to do it. I probably won't ever fish this reel. I'm going to fix this reel and probably give it away. So I'm going to start putting it back together. I've been through it. It feels much better today than it did earlier. I did take everything apart and lubricate it. We were grinding right here on the crosswind block. We were grinding right there. We were grinding tremendously on these bearings. I took the bearings out and I lubed them. I sprayed them with WD-40 and then I lubricated them with reel oil. And once I did that, let them soak for a while, and then I put them back in. So we're not going to do all that on video today. I'm going to tell you that's what we did. In order to do that, all you would really need to do is lay them down, wipe them out real good, spray them with some WD-40, wipe them out again, and come back and flood them with oil. And some of that oil is going to soak into that sealed bearing because they're sealed, but they're not completely sealed. So some of the oil will get into there and it will quiet it down quite a bit. If you, like I said, if this was like your dad's or your grandpa's reel and you wanted to fish with it, or do your reel when you were a kid and you wanted to have your reel up and running, then by all means, go out to Mike's Reel Repair, order yourself a new set of these bearings, and she'll run smooth and quiet as can be. All right, let's go ahead and put it back together. We're going to put the small bearing on the back side, and we're going to put the larger bearing on the front. By the way, this bearing on the front is the same as the two bearings in the side plates. So there's three bearings that are all identical on this reel. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to lubricate the pinion gear. You don't need a lot of grease, but you do need some grease on your pinion gear. So we're going to lubricate it. And reinstall it back into the case. Make sure that this rear bearing fits up inside the case housing here, and then this gear, this bearing on the front, has got to slide all the way in. Once that's in, you can put your 2 screws back in that you took out of there. Now, a lot of people have difficulty putting these little tiny screws in, and the trick that I've learned to it is to put just a dab of grease on the end of your screwdriver, lock it on, and that will hold the screw in place while you screw it in. It works much better with Phillips screws than it does with common screws, but it will work with both. Alright, next we're going to reinstall this collar for your anti-reverse. Reinstall that back on. And remember, this spring goes into this little slot right here on this gear. Okay, that spring will slide up and down in that slot. Remember that the slot goes up over by on the side that is by the gear. So let's put it on, slide it on, and get that spring into the slot. Make sure the shim is installed on the post, and now you are ready to put this screw back on. And this one you definitely most likely want a little bit of grease on, because it's a very tiny slot for the Phillips. I think it's a number 0. Okay, with that done, we'll wipe off the excess grease because there's no point in having it in there. Alright, now when this gear turns, it will pull that in and out. See there? Alright, let's proceed on. At this point, we're going to reinstall the crosswind block. It goes back inside the gear or case. Before you do that, you want to make sure to lubricate the teeth with grease all the way around. Now, the grease will work itself around if you don't put it on every single tooth, but I like to do it. Then I'll put a little bit of grease on the face of the crosswind gear, because when I put the crosswind block on, it's going to be sliding on that gear. Alright? And that post on the crosswind gear slides in this groove. Now, this block is going to go in like this. It's got a hook on this end and a hook on this end. Both hooks have to face forward towards the front gear. Sit it down in there. Make sure that this bottom one fits underneath that plate right there. If it's wedged up against it, it's not going to fit. Now, remember I told you that there are 2 shims right down in here. They present a little bit of problem when you're trying to put this gear back in. Don't try to put them on the gear. If you try to slide them on the gear and then slide it in, the gear won't go on because it will catch right here on your crosswind block gear. Okay? Now, you would inspect this, make sure everything's good, which I've already done. And then you're going to put grease on your teeth, on your main gear, and it fits right back in, straight up like this. And you've got to get it to fit in those shims and then into the bearing. Takes a little wiggling, but you can get it in there. Okay, with that done, everything now should turn freely. Okay, notice your crosswind block wobbles all around. Well, there's a reason behind that. It doesn't have the axle shaft in it yet. Okay, we're going to bring that all the way to the back. Good, we're going to stop at that point. Your axle shaft will go in now. A lot of people will grease the axle shaft. I don't like grease on the axle shaft because I think it tends to slow the reel down, make it a little sluggish. I use reel oil on that shaft. Besides which, usually when you put grease on it, when you slide it in, most of the grease ends up slid off. One last step before we put the axle shaft in, we have to put the rotor on. Okay? The rotor, if you look at the pinion gear, it's got 2 flat sides. Those 2 flat sides made up to 2 flat sides inside this rotor. So you line that up, so that it will all go in. Slide it down, put that in place. It's time to go ahead and reinstall your nut. Remember that the nut is reverse threaded for most nuts. Don't force this. Like right now, that feels like it is on there and threaded, but it's not, because it will screw all the way down easily if it's properly threaded. If you try tightening that down while it's crooked, you're going to mess the threads up. You should be able to thread it all the way on to where you only have to turn the nut just a little bit when you're done. Because remember, this reel was on the bottom of a lake. I don't know how long it was down there, but it was quite a while. It came up with all kinds of nasty stuff on it. And it still turns. So once you've got that in, you've got this locking screw that goes back in. Locking screw needs a little bit of grease. Locking screw gets a little bit of grease, holds it in place, and reinstall the locking screw. At this point, we're ready to reinstall the axle shaft. We've already lubricated it. We're going to slide it in, flat side up, wiggle a little bit to get it to go through the pinion. Once it gets to the back, you want to line it up with the crosswind block. There we go. Goes in and line up the hole. Once you have the hole lined up, put it on and reinstall the gear, or the screw. Now notice that the crosswind block no longer pivots around. It operates properly all the way through, nice and smooth. With that done, we're going to reinstall the bearing in the side case. With that reinstalled in the side case, we're going to reinstall the side case. Move it around, line it up. There you go. Every time I go to put it on, it seems to bind just for a second, and then all of a sudden it just slides into place. Okay, with that done, we're going to put the screws back in. With that in, we've got these two to put back in. You didn't see me take them off, but I did. This is your clicker cog, and this is a shim that goes underneath the spool. Its purpose, if you ever run your spool and you see it building up line high or low, it's because of this shim. This shim is used to adjust where that line fits on there. So if your line is building up high on the reel, it's probably because you need to add a shim. If it's building low, in the event that it's low on the reel, you need to remove a shim so it will fit further down, so that will move the line up. All right. Okay, on the bottom, you'll see this is the clicker. We're going to add a drop of grease. Well, let's go ahead and remove. See where the excess grease? That's what happens when you grease the axle shaft. You get a lot of balled up excess grease. So let's take that out. Clean that part of the spool. All right, with that out of there, we're going to go back and add just a drop of oil to the clicker so that when it goes on here, all right. But looks like we're almost done, but we're not, because we need to go in here and clean up the drag stack. If you look right here, you'll see a spring. The spring fits in the top. It comes out like so. Keep a thumb on it to make sure it doesn't pop across the room or anything. Then you want to reach in here and remove all these. Now there is a set order to these, and we're going to do them by the set order. All right. we're going to lay them out first. See this washer right here? This is an eared washer. Those ears on it fit into these slots right here in this. That's an eared washer. It's first. Next will come a drag washer. Next will come a non-eared washer. Now this one doesn't have the ears on the outside. Instead, it's keyed on the inside. Okay, so it's going to be grabbing hold of the things. This one is actually going to be locked to the reel, whereas this one's going to be locked to the spool. And when you clamp down on those, that's what creates your drag. Okay, next, it's going to be another drag washer. Next will be another round washer. Oh, sorry, an eared washer. And then a drag washer. And then a round washer. And then a drag washer. And then another eared washer. Followed up by another drag washer, followed up by a non-eared washer, one that's keyed on the inside. So normally most drags that I've encountered so far on most fishing reels have had 3 drag washers, 1 eared, 2 keyed, and that's all that's in there. This reel happens to have a whole lot more to its drag stack. So what we do, we clean this out, which I just did a few minutes ago off camera. Wipe it out, clean it. Then we're going to install an eared washer. Then I lubricate it with drag washer grease. And I'm not going to redo all these. I just did them. So, but yeah, see the way I just did that? That's how you would do it. Lubricate each one, reinstalling them in that same line that we just did. Keep them in order, go all the way through. Make sure that those ears fit into those 2 sides for the ones that have them, like this one. See how the 2 ears fit? Yeah, there you go. And then again, your final one is only keyed on the inside, not on the outside with the ears. And once that's done, you are ready to reinstall your spring. Now again, if those drags were damaged, you can go ahead and replace them. I didn't check to see if they have those available. Stand by. Okay, I just went on to Mike's Reel Repair, looked up the drag washer kit, that entire pack with all the eared, all the keyed, all the drag washers, the clip, and the bushing that fits inside. All of those parts are available as one kit for $2.05. So I recommend that if you were going to order parts, you go ahead and order a new drag for your reel and get it set. Now let's put now notice I didn't try to line up those keyways on the inside of this when I put it in. You don't need to. All you need to do is slide it on, push it down until it stops, and then start to rotate. And as it lines up with each one of those, it will drop into place. Watch. There it drops again. There it drops again. All the way down. Once that's there, you can reinstall your drag washer nut, your drag nut. Now I always tighten my drags down until I can't move the drag anymore. Like that. And then I back it off a little bit to test my drag. What that'll do is it'll squeeze out the excess grease that you might have in there and get the drag washers seated up against their surfaces. And it's a nice drag. Works good. When you get done, when you're not fishing with it, or when you're done working on it, loosen your drag. It keeps those drag washers from sticking up against the metal parts. All right, the only thing we've got left is I've got a little bit of drag grinding left right here, so we're going to go ahead and lubricate that. Try a little WD-40 down in there. All right, next we're going to reinstall the handle. Let's go ahead. Now this one is something I do like to put a little grease on, just to make it so that it will come out easier next time somebody goes in. And I like to put a little bit of grease down inside the threads for the knob on the end. Even though I don't have the right knob, I still, let me tell you what, let's go ahead and blue this up a little bit. Put a little grease on my wooden knob. Help protect it from the elements. All right. And there we go. We have the Quantum Optix OP60 fishing reel. Like I said, it could use some new bearings, but it's still very fishable reel. If you've got, had somebody who wasn't all that particular about how it sounds or anything, a lot of kids would just love to have a reel like that. So, but it's, like I said, it's really not worth spending the money putting new bearings in it. The bearings are almost as much as a brand new reel cost. So there it is. Please leave comments if you have any, and if you haven't subscribed and would like to subscribe, please do so. And thank you. This is Rick Stivers with Young Martin's Reels.